All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and so glad to talk today. Friday, it is the free-for-all. We'll get right into it. This is from yesterday, PBS NewsHour.
Today, the UN Security Council demanded that Houthi rebels in Yemen stop attacking international ships in the Red Sea. The U.S. military says there have been more than 24 attacks in the last 7 weeks, the most serious yesterday, when Houthis fired more than 20 drones and missiles right at U.S. and allied warships. Nick Schifrin looks at the Houthi escalation and U.S. options.
In the middle of the Red Sea, British sailors shoot down incoming Houthi drones and missiles. The UK and US called it the Houthis' largest and most complex attack. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
If these attacks continue, as they did yesterday, there will be
there will be consequences. And in fact, there were consequences this morning as the US and the UK launched attacks against the Houthis against Yemen. And this is very, very frightening. It's quite interesting. It's ironic. The U.S. Anthony Blinken, they're outraged. How dare the Houthis, how dare Yemen take any action to stop trade? We've got to keep the ships flowing right through the Red Sea. And you can see it if show that image right there. You can see it right where the YouTube icon is right there. That's Yemen is the corner below it near the Horn of Africa. And they're saying, hey, if Israel is going to be committing genocide against the Gazans, against Palestinians, against our fellow Muslims, and no one's doing anything about it, the US and the UK are protecting Israel. Well, we're going to start shooting their ships. We're going to start blowing up their ships. And the idea that anyone might stand up to U.S. empire is just so upsetting and aggravating to Anthony Blinken that he says, oh, we're going to respond. We're going to take reprisals against Yemen. And we did do that. And this is very, very destabilizing, threatening, obviously, to expand. And I don't want to call right now what is happening in Gaza a war. It's really an extermination. It's ethnic cleansing. It's killing. It's just flat out killing by Israel. But war could clearly break out. And that is as bad as things are now. And they're really, really bad. They could become even worse. I do think it's interesting that the UN Security Council has told the Houthis stop the interference with international trade. But why should we expect the UN to have the influence over Yemen that we wanted to have when we refused to use the UN to try to stop the war or the killing, really, by Israel in Gaza, when Israel refused to go to the UN and say to the UN, hey, let's figure out what we can do to stop future attacks by Hamas and take steps to bring the perps of October 7 to justice. But Israel didn't do that at all. Israel just launched retaliatory strikes, reprisals that treated all Gazans as guilty, which is clearly a violation of international law, violation of genocidal definitions. They are committing genocide. So now we have decided we can't have our tankers and our traders, our ships that are bringing international trade from east to west and west to east fired on. So here's what we have done.
We've got breaking news overnight. It's from the Middle East, a major escalation in the military response to attacks on ships in the Red Sea. The U.S. and the U.K. carried out a wave of airstrikes against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen.
So I want to stop it there. You saw the exhaust, right? The flames coming out of those planes as they're taking off from the carrier. And I thought immediately, the first thing I thought of was, man, that's really bad for the environment. That's really going to wreak havoc on our already severely compromised, unraveling ecology. This is more obviously tremendous amount of fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, not to mention the death and destruction which will result from those attacks. So This is just a terrible, terrible thing that the Biden administration is doing. And you could say, well, the trade has to go. They can't be firing on ships. We can't let Yemen blow up ships in the Red Sea. So that's true. We don't want those ships blown up. So what are the solutions? Is the only solution to fire on the Houthi rebels? Or is it maybe, hey, maybe we won't send ships through the Red Sea? Maybe we'll pressure Israel meaningfully because we actually, the United States and UK and France, have the power to stop Israel's killing, which we haven't exercised our power. We haven't done that. Instead, we facilitated. It's not even like we're neutral. We're not Switzerland when it comes to like the Holocaust, right? Switzerland just stayed out of it during World War II. They didn't get involved. If you got your ass out of Germany and into Switzerland, you were safe. If you got your ass out of Austria and into Switzerland like the Von Trapps did in The Sound of Music, you were safe. But that was it. Switzerland wasn't going to intervene. It wasn't going to tell Germany, stop the killing. It wasn't going to do anything. In fact, if you were a German officer, you were a wealthy Nazi, and you could get your money into a Swiss bank account, well, you would do that, right? A numbered account as the war was winding down and you knew you were going to lose. So Switzerland just stayed out of it, didn't change. We are actually complicit in the Israeli genocide. We are helping Israel kill Gazans. We're worse than Switzerland by far than in World War II. So what should we be doing if we don't like the ships getting blown up? Again, stop the killing in Gaza or just stop the trade, at least for now. I know it's more expensive to go around South Africa, of course, it's a longer trip. Well, you got to pay a little bit of a price if you're going to support genocide. But we're not willing to pay that price. We'll pay the price to the weapons manufacturers. We'll pay the price to cajole our allies to stand with Israel and in support of genocide. But the one thing we won't do is stop business as usual, because that would cost too much money. All right, 240-242-5646. Please do join me on this free-for-all. I'm just going to make sure. I think we're broadcasting, and I did hear myself. So, yes, we are. I got an error message when I first tried to go live, and I just wanted to make sure that I had successfully resolved the issue. All right, Friday. So hope you have a great weekend coming up. I do ask you, if you like what I'm doing, please click subscribe. That's the blue and white square in the bottom right of the screen. You can also click like if you enjoy this video, and share. Please share with your friends, share with colleagues, anyone who might appreciate what I'm doing here. Please do let them know what I'm doing here, because the more we have, the greater power, the influence we can have over the events that are so bad, so harmful, so devastating as we see what's happening to our world. And most, I think, regrettably, most terrifyingly, most frighteningly, and most destructively right now in the Middle East. So a little more from the Gayle King broadcast on CBS News this morning, and also get some information to you from the New York Times and from other outlets.
Supporting Hamas in this war with Israel. Now, the U.S. military says more than 60 targets were hit at 16 different locations. Charlie Daggett is following all of this from Tel Aviv. Charlie, good morning. What can you tell us?
Well, good morning, Gail. This is exactly the kind of major escalation the United States has tried to avoid. A direct confrontation with Iranian-backed militias in this region, expanding the war beyond the battlefields of Gaza and drawing the United States deeper into this conflict.
Right, so that's basically the report as that I'm going to present from CBS. Just what I said, right? I mean, just expanding it, more deaths, 60 targets hit. I don't see how you can support, honestly. The argument, well, Trump is even worse. How much worse can you be than Biden right now? And go ahead, answer that. Yes, Trump could be even worse. He could be. But this is, I can't support that. I can't support this kind of killing, indiscriminate, random, no reflection on how the U.S. has created this tinderbox in the Middle East through its full-throated, unconditional support of what is now clearly revealed to be the genocidal state of Israel. I was talking about this with my son, William, and he said, I said, we're now targeting the Houthis in Yemen. And he says, yeah, but the important question is, what does Saudi Arabia think of all this? And obviously that is an important question because they're such a close ally along with Israel. The Royal House of Saud and Netanyahu are two closest allies, two of the most wonderful people in the world, two of the most wonderful groups of people. And I was like, well, I'm sure the Saudis support what we're doing because the Saudis and the Houthis, the revolutionary group in Yemen that in a coup in 2014 took over from a Saudi-backed leadership group in Yemen, the Houthis supported by Iran. Iran is, of course, the enemy of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia did a lot of research into this actually just for this program because a lot of it wasn't clear to me and it still isn't. So if you know more than I do, and I'm sure many of you do, please let me know what I'm getting wrong. 240-242-5646. But Saudi Arabia has been accused of genocidal action because of its ongoing bombing of the Houthis over the past 8-9 years in Yemen, trying to take them out, get them out of power so that the Sunni-friendly government in Yemen could return to power. And this has led to a tremendous humanitarian crisis. So I said, hey, I'm sure Saudi approves of what we're doing. I'm sure they're happy that we're bombing the Houthis and becoming even more clearly on the side of Saudi Arabia in the proxy war that they're fighting against Iran in Yemen. But it turns out that may not be the case, and we'll get to that in just a moment. What we're seeing here is clearly escalation. The Houthi forces, backed by Iran, condemn the strikes, and they have vowed to respond. So we're going to see some reprisal, some more lives taken, and of course it's just more eye for an eye, which will leave us all blind. For some reason, it doesn't occur to the Biden administration that maybe, just maybe, we need to change our policies. We need to reconsider our support for Israel. We need to say to Israel, no more. No more. But obviously that doesn't occur. That doesn't occur to our government. It doesn't occur to the Democrats in power. And it certainly doesn't occur to the Republicans either. I can't vote for them. New York Times today, just breaking news. Our allies in the Arab world, including Oman, which has kind of tried to mediate negotiations with the Houthis between the United States, and we've supported, of course, Saudi Arabia and provided Saudi Arabia with material, just like we used to provide Israel with weapons of mass destruction, 2,000-pound bombs that are just wiping out buildings, killing scores of people in one attack or more, hundreds, destroying hospitals, just as we've done that for Israel in Gaza. We have been on the side of Saudi Arabia in its, I don't know, is it genocidal? It's been called, it's certainly somewhat genocidal. If Saudi Arabia hasn't the intent, it seems Israel clearly has the intent to clear Gaza out of Gazans, of Palestinians, of Muslims, and maybe Christians too, and just have Jews there to colonize it. That is genocidal intent. Maybe Saudi Arabia doesn't have a genocidal intent in Yemen. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what their The religion is the same Muslim. It's a different sect that's in charge now in Yemen, the Shia rather than the Sunni, from the Saudi government. But I'm not sure if their intent is genocidal, but the impact has been, tremendous death and famine and suffering. So the impact has been devastating, regardless of the overall goal of Saudi Arabia. In any event, we siding, I thought, with Saudi Arabia, but even Oman, a U.S. ally that's mediated talks with the Houthis, says, no, this is a big mistake. There's great concern there. And interestingly, even Saudi Arabia, we didn't even talk to Saudi. Clearly, we were not interested even in what Saudi Arabia, and I've heard, maybe Saudi Arabia is getting a little more modern. Women are driving there now. I understand that is true. And if you're in the cities of Saudi Arabia, maybe Riyadh, Mecca, women have a little bit more freedom than they've had in the past. Maybe Saudi Arabia isn't quite as backward as, we're led to believe. I hope that's true. Saudi Arabia is trying to broker peace with Yemen. You can see in recent months engaged in peace talks. This is from Reuters. They're reacting with great concern to what the United States did. And Saudi Arabia, the royal house there, the royal house of Saud, is kind of in a little bit of a precarious situation. Saudi Arabia has a relatively large population. It doesn't have the kind of wealth per capita that small population countries like the UAE, Kuwait have, which are oil rich, but they don't have to share that oil wealth with too many members of the population because they break it up. So if you're an Arab, if you're a Muslim, then you're a citizen and you share in the nation's wealth. And I think, the numbers are remarkably high in terms of the per capita income of the citizens, the Muslims, in countries, again, like Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain. In Saudi Arabia, the population is much larger. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of unrest. And obviously, the Muslim street, which is, I guess, the Arab street, which is frustrated, angry, resentful because of poverty in Saudi Arabia, is even more outraged now because of what's happening in Gaza, because their co-religionists, their fellow Muslims, are being slaughtered by Israel with the assistance of the United States government, and Saudi Arabia is close allies with the United States. The government there, the monarchy is. So Saudi Arabia has to play it smart, crafty. They can't just simply come out and be in support of the United States. And what we did, bombing Yemen, attacking Yemen, 60 airstrikes, is not going to go over well, obviously, with the government there, which wants to tam down reports or wants to reduce the number of reports of Western non-Muslim killings of Muslims. I guess none of that matters to the Biden administration. None of that matters to Anthony Blinken. You want to vote for these people? Be my guest. I'm not going to do it. I ain't supporting them. You want to weigh in on this? Love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. I mentioned it's depressing for me sometimes to feel as though I'm not convincing people, not persuading people. It's very, very difficult. But I was thinking about this, because I've seen my criticism of the Democrats as somewhat alienating. But I look at, there's another way to look at it. If you don't like the Democrats, if you're a Republican, for example, you should approve of what I'm doing. Since you dislike the Democrats perhaps even more or as much as I do. But I also embrace progressive solutions, progressivism, and on occasion will go after Republicans, and I will later on in this program. So if you're a Democrat, you should like that. So really, you get the best of both worlds. You're a Democrat, I'm going to bash Republicans, and if you're a Republican, I'm going to bash Democrats. You should like that. Unfortunately, that's not how people see it. People want you to be all in on their side. They can't. They're like, well, okay, good. I'm glad you don't like Trump, but you're helping him by criticizing Biden. So yeah, it's hard to tough to win. The two most significant issues we face, I believe, in this world today, with apologies to wealth and income inequality, the massive gap between the tiny few number of haves and the billions of have-nots. So wealth and income inequality is an extraordinary problem, and it exacerbates the two that I'm going to put just slightly above it in terms of the most serious problems we face, the climate holocaust and endless war. Endless war does, of course, exacerbate the climate holocaust. We saw 2023, the hottest year on record by a very significant margin. We're in the sixth great extinction. This is driven largely, but not exclusively, by ever hotter temperatures. Also, certainly, habitat elimination is a very, very serious problem. If you view those problems as greatly serious, as seriously as I do, or close to as serious, then again, you can't be. Especially, even if you're like, well, the U.S. has to be the police person of the world. The U.S. has, as Hillary Clinton said, a special destiny. I don't know, did she say that? What did she say? We're exceptional. You believe in American exceptionalism and all that. You still have to recognize, say, well, that's why we have to support Ukraine. Because we're better than Russia. So we have to support Ukraine. That's why we have to support Israel, because Israel is the only democracy in the region. I think Morocco's a democracy, but it's not really in the region. You want to believe that? Be my guest. But you cannot ignore the fact that our military footprint, which has been greatly expanded both by Democratic and Republican presidents over the past, well, since George W. Bush, Dick Cheney were president, this has been devastating for the environment. You know who brought this to my attention, I believe, was my old friend from Carmel, Habanero Herb. And it always disappointed me because Herb had at one point been such an ardent environmentalist who called my program and to cry the impact of the climate holocaust. And later on, he became a denier, which I never could understand why. I tried to get him to explain, what the basis was for his denial. But I think what a lot of people started to think was, well, big government, big OPEC, big oil, they're all the same. And so I can't choose between them. I can't say, well, if the government is telling me, if NOAA is telling me, if NASA is telling me that we have climate change, I'm not going to believe it. I think that was kind of the attitude, and it was extremely difficult, if not impossible, for me to combat, unfortunately. Again, something that doesn't make me a happy camper. We see in the U.S. Army, the U.S. military, we're producing all this greenhouse gases. And it's interesting because this is from Peril and Promise. This was reported on by WETA, so that's PBS, that the amount of fossil fuel emissions, greenhouse gases, aren't even reported. So when we say we hit record numbers of emissions in 2023, 2022, whatever year, then we may not even be including all of the carbon burning by the military. So even when you hear, well, we're going to see the numbers start to drop, right? 2024, we're on pace. And I believe this may be true, by the way. 2024, we may be on pace to burn a little less fossil fuels than we did in 2023, which would be good. Does that include the militaries around the world? Because if it doesn't, then you can throw those numbers out. They don't tell the whole story. The U.S. military is apparently the number one source of fossil fuel emissions the greatest single cause of the climate holocaust in the world. So that is very, very relevant when we talk about what we're doing in Ukraine, when we talk about what we're doing in Gaza, and it's especially relevant when you see those planes taken off from those carriers in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf and around the region, because in the Indian Ocean, because we're just simply adding, pumping more of that poison, the world-destroying gases into the atmosphere. Any thoughts? 240-242. I got to look at that number, 5646. I still have it in my mind. The old number, right? Or my old home number. Right. It's confusing. Let's just look at those, because seeing those planes, and it always is kind of like a very almost erotic, pornographic effect. I remember during the Gulf War, the second Gulf War, CNN kept showing over and over and over. I think it was these was it water or surface to surface missiles being shot from carriers, and it was very, very phallic looking. And I kind of got the same vibe here. So we'll just play that video just a little more. You can see
breaking news overnight. It's from
off.
The Middle East, a major escalation in the military response to attacks on ships in the Red Sea. U.S. and the U.K. carried out a wave of airstrikes against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen.
So yeah, I mean, I think you get that vibe, right? This is kind of a orgasmic explosion by the U.S. military, by these generals and the president, and extraordinarily destructive, extraordinarily harmful. I mean, I guess it's nice for them, maybe. I don't know. Wouldn't do much for me. 240-242-5646. The Democratic Party, and I promise the Republican haters out there, we'll get to them. They're not going to escape censure today. But the Democratic Party really offers no hope, really. Remember, anyone who's saying to themselves, hell, AOC, hell, Jamie Raskin, these folks voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the most powerful Democrat in the House of Representatives. In fact, they voted for him to be the most powerful person. They voted for him to be House Speaker. You cannot square that with concern for poor, struggling, working people. You cannot square that vote for Jeffries with any kind of concern for the environment or peace. And the top leadership of the Democrat Party is even worse. So here, this is from Black Agenda Report. There's no hope from the Democratic Party for peace. If you want to cast a vote against the Israeli genocide there, I kind of corrected it for Black Agenda Report. They say Israel's war on Gaza. You have no choice except for Stein and West. And I agree, that is 100% accurate. And I really, really like that they bash RFK Jr. there, because he has been absolutely awful on this issue. And so, by the way, has Marianne Williamson. Brianna Joy Gray, I don't know what she's thinking. She has announced she supports Williamson. I have no idea what's in her mind. She refused to have a conversation with Norm Finkelstein about this. I don't know if she's pulled back. I don't think she liked to be confronted. Maybe she doesn't want to appear to be backpedaling or appear to have been impacted by somebody's criticism. I don't know. But that's not acceptable, Brianna Joy Gray. You cannot be a progressive and support Marianne Williamson for president. You have to choose Stein or West. And I have made it clear, despite my admiration for years for Dr. West, despite my initial announcement that I would indeed support Dr. West because of his somewhat confused campaign, and more particularly his pullback, his refusal to run as a Green. I'm there for Dr. Stein. And she has a track record, right? 2016, 2020, now 2024. Gavin Newsom. I, full disclosure, supported Newsom. I believe I did, although I couldn't vote when he last ran for governor. Or no, it was against Kevin DeLeon, was it? Who was also extremely disappointing. So I don't know whether I would have voted at all. When it comes to genocide, Gavin Newsom is a problem. 2 months ago, he chastised the Oakland City Council for calling for a ceasefire in Gaza without condemning Hamas. Okay, let me explain something to you, Gavin. Hamas is not shooting and killing Palestinians. Israel is. Hamas is not killing civilians. Israel is. Hamas is not blowing up hospitals. Israel is. The idea that you can't criticize Israel, you can't call for a ceasefire without criticizing, condemning Hamas is absurd. And it's the worst kind of, I guess, both-siderism or whataboutism. Sure, if Hamas was still operating right now in Israel and taking more people hostage and killing more people, and was indeed, despite the failure of any, persuasive corroborating evidence, engaging in widespread sexual attacks on Israelis, if Hamas was doing all those things, then sure, let's condemn Hamas too, and let's call in the U.S. Army, the U.S. military to separate the two sides. But Hamas isn't doing any of those things. Hamas engaged in one terrorist attack, and that was the end of it. Israel is engaged in a continuing, ongoing killing, and it's killed, 20 times as many people or more. And a higher percentage of those deaths have been civilians. But Gavin Newsom, no, we can't condemn Israel unless we also mention Hamas. We can't even call for a ceasefire. It's not even they were condemned. The Oakland City Council wasn't even condemning Israel. It was just simply saying we need a ceasefire. No, can't do that. Killing's got to keep going on, according to Gavin. BDS in the news, peaceful, right? Boycott, divestment, sanctions. We can't support Israel because it's engaged in ethnic cleansing. It's engaged in colonialism. It's impoverishing millions of Palestinians. We can't support them. We should boycott. We should divest. We should issue sanctions against Israel. So the response by the elites in this country is it's illegal. You can't do that. You can't call for BDS. The response by the elites, including Gavin Newsom, can't mention it. We're not going to talk about it. Nobody's going to know about it. It never happened. That's your Democratic Party. That's who many of you think we have to vote for. 2023, 2024, 2024, not 2023. Here's another guy from the Democratic Party. And this guy, Fetterman, I supported him. I thought he was a real progressive. He seemed to have true working class chops. And I don't know, maybe his stroke has kind of messed him up, right? I mean, maybe he's kind of, and I'm serious about that. Maybe his mind is really kind of lost because he's taken such a hard right turn. But I would remind you that this is certainly not the first time this has happened. The Sinema, right? Is it Kristen? I always get Kristen Sinema in Arizona. She used to be a Green. She used to be a Green, for crying out loud. And she became one of the most corrupt corporate Dems in the Senate along with Manchin. And what do we always hear? Well, the reason the Democrats aren't getting, it's not fair to say the Democrats aren't getting anything done. It's not fair to blame the Democrats because it's just a couple of bad apples. It's just Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Here's the problem with that argument. Now you have a John Fetterman. There are always going to be Democrats who move to the right. The lure of the money, the lure of influence, peddling becomes just too great for too many. And you might say, well, how that could happen with the Greens too, like we saw with Sinema. And I would answer, yes, it could. But at least if you have a third party that's opposed to the duopoly, that stands against the duopoly, they have a great incentive not to compromise their values. And hopefully, if we are able to elect people from a third party, from a fourth party, they'll be able to police just a little bit better and hold their electeds to account. Frankly, I don't think Joe Biden, certainly not Joe Manchin, certainly not Sinema, certainly not Hakeem Jeffries, they probably love what they view as the new and improved John Fetterman. Here's John Fetterman on Israel and genocide.
Now South Africa is bringing that kind of a trial. Maybe South Africa being ought to sit this one out when they're talking about criticizing
So sit it out, South Africa. Don't get involved. Don't tell us we can't support Israel when it's killing Gazans indiscriminately and pushing them into the desert and bombing areas where we told them that they could be safe. Stay out of it, South Africa. That's your Democratic Party. You want to vote for them? Be my guest. I want to make it very, very clear. If you think my criticism of the Democrats is somehow to be interpreted as or can be fairly read or heard as an embrace of the Republicans, that's absurd. I'm not sure the Republicans are worse, but I'm darn confident they ain't better. We live, and I've said this, I said one of the reasons that I thought the TPP, this was back in 2016, would help China, right? The whole idea, Barack Obama tried to sell the free trader, Barack Obama, I didn't say traitor, the free trader, Barack Obama, tried to sell the American public on the Trans-Pacific Partnership by claiming it was designed to hold China in check. It was going to be our pact with Vietnam, where we would, instead of offshoring jobs to China, we would end that and we would start offshoring jobs to Vietnam and other countries where the wages were even lower than China. And I said, this is going to help China. Barack Obama's full of crap. Why did I say that? Because ultimately we lived then, and I think we still do, in a binary world. Basically, the two hegemons are China and the United States. And to the extent that we hurt ourselves, we help China. And any expansion of trade to more low-income countries, of free trade, any more offshoring of jobs will hurt the United States and thereby help China. That was my argument then, and I'm sticking to it. You could say, I think it would be a very fair statement, well, if we live in a binary world when it comes to hegemony, China and the United States, and we also live in a binary world when it comes to politics in the United States. There's two parties. There's the Democrats and there's the Republicans. And whatever you do, whenever you criticize the Democrats, how you're helping Republicans. I hear that argument. We have to change that dynamic. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying we have to change it. We have to move to a place, we have to get to a place where hurting the Democrats also hurts the Republicans, because a lot of times they're the exact same people. They're the same billionaires who run, control, and determine policy in both parties. So we have to change that. We have to come up with alternatives. And as Black Agenda Report said, the alternatives are Jill Stein and Cornel West. I don't like it that there's two alternatives now because I don't want them cannibalizing. But yeah, there are those two. here's how bad the Democrats are. This is from the Sunrise team, the Sunrise movement. You can see the date yesterday, 5 o'clock, 1708, 508 here on the East Coast of the United States. DeSantis, Haley, and Vivek Ramaswamy, the three, I guess, still standing Republican Trump challengers, are all deniers. Here's Nikki Haley. She doesn't quite deny it, but she might as well. I mean, and you know, I worry less sometimes about what people say or what their beliefs are versus what they do. I get that Joe Biden says that the climate holocaust is real, but just like Barack Obama, his policies are making it worse. So does it really matter if he believes it? I mean, who really cares if he believes it if what he's doing is making it worse? Nikki Haley on Fox. I think this is yesterday, maybe.
We absolutely need to roll back all of Biden's green subsidies, including what he's had the EPA do. Right now, the EPA cares more about sagebrush lizards than they do about whether we can afford our utility bills. But all of these bailouts. So
there's that kind of typical humor from the Republicans. Oh, he cares more about sagebrush lizards than heating bills. I will say this. I kind of agree with Haley. I don't like all the subsidies either. I'm a big tax guy. Tax the bads. The bads are obviously fossil fuels. Let's tax them. Now she would have, this would make Ginsburg's would make the price of heating oil more expensive. And I would, but I would also rebate the money to the American public so that they would have the resources in the short run to pay for their heating bills, but they would also have the resources to move in a different direction, to move away from fossil fuels. And they would be incentivized to do that. So that's the answer, obviously. But, you know, just getting rid of incentives to move towards fossil fuels is obviously a recipe for disaster without the proper disincentives to consume those self-same fuels, those self-same carbon-based energy.
And packages that he's done for electric cars, he's forcing people to have to buy electric cars by 2035. That's not even practical because, one, we don't have the infrastructure for it. And I'm not even talking about charging stations. Electric vehicles are heavy. Our roads and bridges wouldn't even be able to handle it if we did it. Secondly,
well, I mean, our infrastructure is falling apart and Republicans have done nothing to try to protect it or save it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think, to that degree, again, she's got a point. I'm not a big believer in incentivizing winners and losers. And I'm not a big believer in forcing people to buy electric cars. We need clearly public transit and we need clearly much higher taxes on fossil fuels. Both would, of course, draw gasps and pearl clutching from Ms. Haley.
70% of the batteries in electric cars come from China, our number one national security threat. So that's not smart. But thirdly, the biggest reason is don't push people on what they have to do and how they have to live. That's the problem we've had with government the past 8-10 years is they now think they know better than the people. That's the wrong way to go. If we want to improve the environment, let's transition. Let's partner with the producers on how the best ways are to go about that.
All right. So her solution took her a little bit of time to get there. Nikki Haley's solution, let's partner with the producers. Wow. So we should be, I guess, putting the CEOs of Exxon, Chevron, Texaco, or Chevron, Texaco is the same company, right? Exxon, whatever, Chevron. They're the ones who are going to help us out of this problem. The ones who denied, who hid, who lied about this for 50 years. That's who Nikki Haley trusts. Yeah, that's your Republican Party. How about Ramaswamy? Maybe he's a little bit better. I mean, this is a guy who obviously came out of nowhere. I had no idea who. I never watch. I honestly pay no attention to these people. One reason I don't spend a lot of time bashing Republicans is because I just, I don't spend a lot of time talking about scorpions. I mean, they are what they are. Their nature is their nature. But their nature is just so egregious, so awful that I guess every now and then we've got to remind ourselves of it.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax. And we have to declare independence for it.
So is he arguing that the others are bought and paid for by environmentalists? I sure didn't hear that from Nikki Haley. That's how insane these people, and you know, he's not insane, but those who buy this, they don't have a real connection. They're not tethered to reality. If they're buying that, you can't vote for Republicans either. You can't do it. It's even worse. How about the front runner? We haven't heard a lot from him. You know, he hasn't been at these debates. He's not, as far as I know, not going on. He's certainly not talking about the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust. But he has in the past. Here he is.
Science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
He says it's going to start getting cooler. That was 3 years ago. No, it got hotter. 2023, the hottest year ever. And the response is, I wish science agreed with you. And here's what Trump has to say.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
I don't think
Donald
science
Trump
knows. And we'll hear from Biden. So, again, the Republicans are, you can't vote, you know, obviously not acceptable, unacceptable completely. And certainly when it comes to the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust. Trump is better on Ukraine than this guy, but he's, if possible, and I don't know if it is possible, even worse on Israel. Here's Biden's response.
Climate denial may not have caused these fires and record floods and record hurricanes, but if he gets a second term, these hellish events will continue to become more common, more devastating, and more deadly.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And it's also true that if Biden gets a second term, they're going to continue to be more hellish, more deadly, more destructive. There's simply no daylight. It's not that you're on your own. When we continue to vote for the duopoly, we're on our own. This story, very upsetting to my wife, especially to me too. She's a teacher. She teaches elementary school kids. She sees hungry kids. She sees kids who don't have enough. She teaches at a Title I school. She knows that kids and families suffer in the summer when they don't have opportunities to get those meals at school. Is there any other way to look at this but just outright cruelty? I don't think so. These are cruel people. These are hard-hearted people. These are mean-spirited people. They may be reading the polls. They may be pandering to a certain segment of the electorate that doesn't want tax money from billionaires to be used to help keep kids from being hungry. They may, it may not be purely their own belief system, but what kind of person panders to those kind of people? And, I don't even think you can really make an argument that this is politically justified. I think that if a Republican governor said, look, we don't like all these government aid programs and we want the government, to spend less money and this and that. But, hungry families, hungry kids, they could say, the economy has not worked for working people. That's why we need these programs. But not going to take food out of the mouths of hungry children. And yet they do. I mean, isn't that amazing? Here's Iowa. Here's Iowa. This is the governor of a report from news there. In see, what is, I guess it's the Hawkeye State. Is that right? I think it's the Hawkeye State. A lot of corn in Iowa.
Brought you yesterday. You'll remember we reported that Iowa Governor Reynolds now says the state will not be participating in a program to provide food for low-income children over the summer. And she's citing childhood obesity as a reason why. The summer EBT program started during COVID to help children who get free meals at school to have something to eat when school is out for the summer. Iowa took part in it for the last 3 years, but today, Governor Reynolds said the federally funded program is not sustainable, adding that it doesn't provide long-term solutions for the issues impacting children and families. An EBT card does nothing to promote nutrition at a time when childhood obesity has become an epidemic.
All right, there's so much wrong. And by the way, the news reporters couldn't even believe it. If you looked at their faces, let me see if I can get that back for you. They couldn't even believe this, right? This is from Des Moines. So this is your Iowa news feed, and they're like aghast. They're like, how could she do that? There they are. So Reynolds says it doesn't help with obesity. Well, actually it does. If you provide healthy, nutritious food for children, then they will be less obese than if they're just stuffing themselves whenever there's a bag of chips around, because lots of times they're hungry and they're just filling up when they have opportunity to. So as a matter of fact, it does help. Do I like the way EBT is administered? No. Do I think that a lot of, quote, foods like Doritos shouldn't be included in those programs? Yes. But in the end, the governor just flat out wrong. Obesity is not a sign of sufficient nutrients. It's not a sign that the food distribution system isn't leaving people behind. It's often just the opposite. It's a sign that families are doing whatever they can to get food of any sort. Excuse me for 1 second here. Almost made it through. Did have a lozenge, did have to cough there. Use my cough button. And I'm proud of myself because I figured out this solution so that I'll know when my mic. So you can see I actually now, when I mute myself, there's a big yellow light that pops up and says mic muted. So I won't come back on and forget that I'm muted. I did a lot of research on the internet to find that, by the way. I didn't think of it on my own, but when I saw the solution, I was like, wow, that's great. I was like, well, how come I didn't think of it? So let's just finish this off. This is from your Washington Post, and conservative, I think maybe a Republican, maybe not. Conservative Facebook friend was mocking the Washington Post, called the Washington Post, and I get it. I mean, this is clearly an elite organ. It represents the billionaire class. It's owned by one of the richest men in the world. I understand the richest man in the world right now is Elon Musk, but I don't think Bezos is too far behind him. But, you know, when they report things as facts, as factual, such as 2023, the hottest year on record, that's true. It is. And you don't have to rely on the Washington Post. You can go to NBC, you can go to BBC. There's lots and lots of news media that's reporting this. So that is true. Now, you could argue that the measurements are wrong, or that the thermometers have been, gamed. I suppose someone's, standing there before they measure. Look at those thermometers, holding the bulb in their hand so it'll go up. I mean, you could maybe make that argument, but there's no dispute that NOAA, the NASA, and that World Meteorological Organization and others are all reporting that, yes, 2023 hottest air and surface temperatures ever are recorded. That is the case. And it is the case that Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen just said, I don't believe in welfare. Okay, I'd rather have people starve. Nebraskans will have to starve because I personally don't believe in welfare. That's your Republican Party. Can't vote for them either, can you? I want to end, and yesterday we're a little less than an hour, so today will be just a little bit shy of an hour as well. This is what I'll be, and I don't really want to, I have to be honest with you folks. Nobody is more against the Israeli genocide in Gaza than I am. I don't really want to go downtown tomorrow and march. I just don't. I mean, it's not going to be real pleasant out. It's going to be cold. It's a pain in the ass for me to get downtown. It's not really what I want to do. And I don't even think I don't know what good it's going to do. But I have to do something. I can't sit it out. So I'm going to be there. And I hope you'll be there, either in literally or figuratively in spirit. And there are going to be other affinity events, I believe, around the country. So if you're not in this region, maybe you can get to one. Have a great weekend. Monday is Arlen Day. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thanks for being part of Halitics. Please, final word. Yes, I'll say it again because it's so important. Click like, click subscribe. Let's get those numbers up. We're inching towards 200. My goal 1,000 by the end of this year. Hopefully before then.